That is right. Today we want to return to the subject of Plex Media Server and discuss the best Plex Media Server NAS that you can buy at the end of 2023 going into 2024. We saw a lot of new hardware arrive on the scene in the last 12 months, and although not all of it was absolutely tip-top, it's worth arguing that some of it, certainly in the field of Plex Media Server utilization and turning your own media you've collected over the decades into your own private Netflix, is certainly going to be of interest to you. But before we go into the three NASs that I recommend for individual reasons that you should go for if you're looking at 1080p or 4K and indeed 8K Plex NAS, more on that later on, a few quick disclaimer bits right out the gate. Number one, we do have right now over on NAScompares a NAS builder tool that Eddie's been working on that allows you to sort of work out the best NAS for your budget. So for example, if we were to look at this system here, if we wanted a we wanted to store ourselves 30 TB of storage, we're saying we want to have at least 4 bays of storage, 1 disk of drive failure, or we can add any budget we like, and then down here we can go ahead and choose that we want to access Plex Media Server, then or just general multimedia, or tick other boxes, say how many users are going to access it, the kind of connection speeds we want. We can go ahead, click at the bottom, and it will make recommendations for NAS solutions based on those parameters, and you can play with those, choosing for example if you want to go for 4K on its own, scaling up some of that storage capacity and some of that redundancy, adding some extra features there. It will go ahead and modify those results accordingly depending on your needs. It's quite a useful little tool, and I recommend you check that out if you need a little helping hand choosing the right NAS solution, not just for Plex but for other services too. Next up, we've made other videos here on the channel in the past talking about how to make the most of your Plex Media Server NAS, as well as mistakes that people regularly make. We've got that also in an article form where it goes through the 8 things that people always overlook before they buy a NAS for Plex Media Server. And finally, before we go any further, it's worth highlighting there was a NAS that almost made the list, but unfortunately it was delayed at release, and therefore, because I haven't physically got it here, I can't include it. And that is a new NAS from Terramaster, the F4424 and the F4424 Pro. I have a video coming up on this very, very soon, if not already, going through this new Intel N95 and Intel i3 affordable 2 and 4 bay NAS. But you can learn more about those in a link in the description. And finally, it's worth highlighting, if you are unfamiliar with the utility of Plex Media Server on your own NAS solution, it's worth highlighting that it isn't just about the quality of the media you're watching. It's not just about the power of the NAS, it's actually about the proficiency. The reason I've got this NAS here on screen, this is a much older generation NAS. This is the 2020 released DS220 Plus, which has more recently been upgraded, a refresh I should say, with the DS224 Plus. But this system here does support Plex Media Server. If we wish, we could select Plex there. We've got it here on this screen, and it will play multimedia fine. Here is a 3 megabits per second H.264 1080p media file. It's playing like an absolute dream, and while it does that in the background, we can open up the resource monitor here, take a direct look at that CPU, and we can see the CPU is doing absolutely fine. Down there, it's this tiny little number here at the bottom. Utilization is very, very small indeed. We can just go straight into the on-screen monitor and see that CPU utilization, bringing that to the top, isn't that high. The file plays there in the background absolutely fine. Now, one of the reasons that file is playing absolutely fine is because we're using an H.264 file. H.264 is a compression technique that is utilized to take the movie that you watch on the big screen in the cinema into the comfort of your living room. That compression technique to make these bigger productions smaller. That is, relatively open source. Anyone can use it. But there is a better compression technique known as HEVC, otherwise known as H.265, highly efficient video codec. And this compression technique is even more efficient, and it's been developed in line with 4K and even early 8K. But the problem is, it is proprietary, it is owned, and licensing is required. Why am I bringing this up? Well, you should check whether you have a lot of HEVC media in your collection, and moreover, the devices you use to watch them. You might be trying to use just a mobile phone to watch it. You might be utilizing a high-powered MacBook. Whatever device you're using, if it has an HEVC license, that will make all the difference. Now, to put it into perspective, here we have a 10 megabits per second HD file, so 1080p. So 10 megabits per second bit rate is pretty darn high. It is HEVC in compression. If we play this file here, and we look at the bottom of the screen, it will automatically need to convert that file. It can't play it natively because Chrome doesn't have the license natively built into it there. And as you can see, although it's played the file, CPU utilization has gone up to 22%. It's gone down now as the file is concluding, and it managed to do the job there, but it did go up. Now, that was the 10 megabits per second H.265 file. Now here we have the Windows client tool. This is the Windows Plex tool. So when you've got Plex on your phone, when you've got it on your tablet, on your TV, they are the client tools, not the media server. Let's find that same file playing from this same NAS. So this is, again, the 10 megabits per second HD HEVC file. We play it there, and immediately you can see it's playing in the original quality. No compression, no conversion, none of that. It's just immediately playing, and utilization is not spiking. As you can see there, utilization of that file is still keeping the CPU running absolutely fine, and that is because you don't need to convert the file because the device I'm playing it on, in this case the Windows client tool here, has got that supported codec there, that are not codec compression technique. So it's very important when looking at a Plex Media Server NAS that one, your client devices can actually play the files, and if they can't play the files, it's important that you know that the NAS that you're utilizing has sufficient power and proficiency to get the job done. And this is one of the main reasons that 2 of the 3 NASs we're going to talk about today were selected. But for now, that's enough disclaimer. Let's crack on with our top 3. The Synology DS224 Plus, I think, ruffled a few feathers when Synology rolled this out the gate in summer 2023. Utilising an existing hardware configuration in the J4125 processor that we already saw them roll out in the 2020 generation, there were some users that were less pleased than others that Synology had become overly reliant on this slightly older hardware configuration. However, Synology does have a history of taking those pre-existing hardware configurations and architecture and moving it onto the previous lower tier in the next generation. What I mean is they take what is once considered fully featured and prosumer and makes it the standard class in the following generation. And the DS224 Plus is a good example of that. Rolling out the gate with an Intel quad-core based processor, the Intel J4125 at 2.0 gigahertz to be clocked up to 2.7, it's a decent enough CPU and processor there. It also has integrated graphics at 350 megahertz that can burst up to 750 when needed, and that integrated graphics is what allows this to become an entry-level 4K transcoding box. That's right, this isn't just for playing 4K. It can actually do that conversion that we mentioned of a lot of 4K multimedia there. Now, how do we know this? Well, alongside the review that you're seeing here on screen, where we went into the pros and the cons of the system, not just with standing Plex Media Server, we also conducted quite extensive Plex Media Server testing here on the channel earlier this year. So 3 months ago, you can see that video there. We went through and tested all manner of files. We went ahead with H.265, H.264. We went ahead with 1080p, 720p, but also 4K. We went through all manner of testing, and it played 85% of the files that we threw at it. It was a very powerful and capable box there in our testing. And again, every NAS I'm going to talk about today is a NAS that we've performed extensive performance testing on, and they'll all be linked in the description below. But the reason this NAS is considered the best 4K entry-level box, notwithstanding its ability to play those files and support of hardware transcoding if you use a Plex Media Server Pass, on top of that, it is a Synology NAS, and Synology NASs with DSM 7.2 are still considered the best software option in the market today. And I think it needs to be touched on that regardless of the solution you look at for Plex Media Server, you're going to want to maximize your investment. And when you want to maximize that investment, it means this box that you might be using to watch your movies for a few hours a day, you want to use it for the other 20 hours if possible to do other things to get your money back. And DSM is the best option for that when it's got got support of things like Synology Drive, Synology Office, Synology Chat, Synology Surveillance Station, and all of the apps and services that are rolled into their platform. And this system arriving at a modest price point, where at the moment it's $299, but we've regularly seen this on offer for as low as $250. We saw that on Black Friday, on Prime Day, and it does come on and off on offer quite a lot. Therefore, although it's $299, you can definitely get it cheaper than that when you shop around. And when you look at our review, you can find out existing offers on empty and bundled deals linked below on that article. But the point I'm making is, this isn't just a Plex Media server. It's a great 4K entry-level NAS box, and although its hardware is a little modest, I'm not going to call it the most powerful solution, but for the price that you are paying for the hardware and the software and the overall return on investment, that ROI, the DS224 Plus from Synology is a great NAS option. And in 4K, for its modest stature, it performed extraordinarily well, and therefore, as the 4K entry Plex NAS solution, I recommend it. A surprisingly left field choice, I think, as some of you might think, but I'm going to go with, as the best kind of all-rounder Plex NAS in 2023 going into 2024, is this, the Asustor Lockerstor Gen 2 series, available in a 2-bay, a 4-bay, and a 6-bay. Now, yes, we are focusing, exclusively on Plex Media Server for today's video, and I'll say right now, in terms of access, this system is a great little choice between it. Why am I bringing this NAS up for this? Well, notwithstanding its price tag that can retail for the 2, 4, and 6-bay, starting at around $3 to $350 up to about close to $599. This system arrives with 4 storage bays for hard drives, 4 NVMe bays as well internally. So if you want to use particularly complex media and you don't want to remove the bottleneck that can sometimes be associated with the performance of hard drives in a storage system, and if you want to play with 8K native media, this will allow you to do so thanks to those NVMe bays at Gen 3 x 1, providing 1000 megs per second each for that storage media there. And with the depreciating cost of M2 NVMe SSDs going into 2024, it's a good way to make that upgrade, but it doesn't end there. This system, again, unsurprisingly, we went ahead and did our Plex Media Server testing on this, performed extraordinarily well, but it performed well for 2 very specific reasons. Now, it arrives on a much newer generation CPU Celeron than the Synology we talked about with that Celeron, the J4125. This arrives with the M5105, a 2.0 GHz CPU that can be burst up to 2.9 GHz when needed, but more importantly, also features integrated graphics that can be burst up to 800 MHz when needed. There is just more under the bonnet to get the job done. But the second reason it's really, really intriguing, and the second reason it performed very, very well in our testing, was because, and if we log into the device here that I've got here set up on the NAS system, in the options menu here, we've got something called Media Mode. Now, Media Mode is very, very important. They're the only brand I've seen that can do this, and it's quite an interesting choice in the back end. One of the issues we encountered with some NAS systems back in 2020 and 2021 was the drivers and the integrated graphics on the CPU not meshing the best with that of Plex Media Server. And even though you were using a Plex Pass, and you should be able to use hardware transcoding, which means you're actually using the onboard architecture to get the job done, it wasn't being done correctly, and you were getting forced into using software transcoding or using inefficient drivers. Media Mode allows the system to switch gears, much like you would have off-road handling on a car or a motor. I don't drive, can you tell? It allows the system to be more optimized towards multimedia. And when we did that, we got this system playing light-end 8K media as well. And again, when you look at things like the Asustor FlashStore series, which is an M2 NVMe optimized system, when you had that in media mode, 8K playback was indeed possible. But if you don't want to spend that kind of money and you want to focus a lot more on hard drives, this is still a great system by option alternative. And when you break into the hardware specifications and you find out more about what it can do with 2.5 gigabit Ethernet out the bat, optional switching out of those M2 NVMe's towards a 10 gigabit Ethernet network connectivity port, there's a lot to like here. There's also support for remote control, either utilizing the Wi-Fi or an infrared remote control. On top of that, there is even an HDMI output, which allows you to have local Plex Media Access. So here's one of their videos on their channel from before, where you can enable Plex to be accessible via the HDMI output, utilized with a keyboard, video, mouse, a Bluetooth, an infrared remote control, or a Wi-Fi remote. It will allow you to access your Plex Media server from the comfort of your sofa and access media natively. Now, it's not an official Plex Media server app, and availability of that HDMI app has been sporadic at best, but it's still nice to have that support, to not have to be overly reliant on the network when you could literally just tap directly into the NAS as a local media box for Plex, while simultaneously allowing the multimedia box to be accessed remotely by all connected users on your 1080p and 4K multimedia there. Now, pricing on this box, again, as mentioned, it does fluctuate depending on where you look around, and depending on your region, availability is going to be different. And again, you can see a price there that's way outside of what we'd like to see. When you look at the UK or you look at other sites like B&H, the pricing becomes a lot more reasonable there. Now, when it comes to the software, I already touched on that. The software is still pretty darn good. It's not quite up there with Synology software, and they're lacking a few of the AAA plus applications as mentioned for this return on investment to take advantage of the whole thing. But what you have is still pretty darn good. They've got a larger selection of third-party applications and services available. They do have mobile apps for iOS and Android. They've got desktop apps. They've got a whole host of apps, support of BTRFS. They've got their own synchronization local tool that you can install on your local system. They've got photo, video, and music applications there. They've got a virtual machine application, Docker application. It's all there. It's all at your disposal. It's not all quite as good and smooth as Synology. Like their surveillance app isn't as good as Synology's. Their VM app is third party, utilizing VirtualBox. But if you weren't going to use those anyway, and you were just looking for a robust, high-performance Plex Media Server NAS, this is the best all-rounder right now in 2023. Now, if you watched last year's video, you'll know, chances are, this was never going to go any other way. The QNAP TVS H874 is by far the best turnkey Plex Media Server NAS I have ever seen. Now, I'm going to have to add a bunch of caveats there. One, turnkey, very important. You may have noticed all the solutions I've talked about today are combined hardware and software solutions that are practically ready out the box. You still have to buy your hard drives and SSDs though. Secondly, this is a system that you deploy it straight away, and it's got sufficient hardware to do anything in terms of multimedia. What do I mean by anything? Well, even through all the course of my review, when I was going through a lot of the hardware, this is at the end of 2022, and since then QNAP have released several versions of this box, integrating things like Thunderbolt 4 connectivity. This system not only played every single test I could throw at it, going all the way up to 120 and 200 and 400 megabits per second 4K, it could play multiple of them at once. I threw everything at this box. All of those files you're seeing there on screen are high-end 200 and 400 megabits per second 4K HEVC files. This thing is borderline limitless. On top of that, not to be put off, Christmas last year, I then went ahead and went for 8K transcoding, and this system was able to convert high-end 8K files that were around 1 gigabyte every 30 seconds of data. Absolutely enormous data there. Something where when we got to the end of the testing, the only limitation we found was our client hardware, and trying to run 8K on our local recording system was the bottleneck. Not even the NAS. The NAS was just sitting there tapping its watch saying, come on, give me the best you got. So if you're looking at a system right now and you want genuine turnkey, the TVS H874 is the best option out there for an off-the-shelf solution for Plex Media Server. And when you dig into the hardware, you can see why. Notwithstanding it is a 12th gen Intel system, this system rocks out the gate with an i9, i7 or i5 processor with integrated graphics that actually rivals some lower level entry graphics cards, and that's on its own integrated graphics. On top of that, being a Gen 4 system, it supports Gen 4 SSD performance. That means one Gen 4 SSDs, which again have come down in price, which can hit a potential 6,000, 7,000 megabytes per second, could be used for that higher end multimedia. So even if years from now the internal PSU somehow is not good enough for your multimedia, which is madness, you can still install media that can deliver that media via storage at 6,000 or 7,000 as mentioned, so fast that the CPU will be so greatly assisted that, again, any client device you're receiving this multimedia, that's going to be your only true bottleneck. And as 8K client hardware is still very much in its infancy, I still think right now this is a system that 5-10 years down the line is still going to be playing your decades of media perfectly well. What's the downside? Ooh, that price tag. The price tag knocking around at the cheapest I could find this box was 2,000 Nika. If you want to go for that highfalutin i9 model there, the i9 with 10G and 64GB of memory, you're looking at 3,000 to 3,500, depending on your own local currency availability and pricing and all that T&C nonsense. It is not cheap. There is a reason why you're getting all that hardware for that price tag, but still nonetheless, this is a big investment. But if you take your multimedia seriously, if you are someone that is going to be graduating towards 8K media in your next 5 to 10 years, if you are someone who has the most cutting edge, bleeding edge TVs and multimedia devices, and you want to make sure that your multimedia collection that you store already ripping from your UHD 4K mental Blu-ray media onto local copy, this is probably going to be the best future-proofing option if you think or you have an inkling that you're going to need that kind of coverage in years to come. And if you are someone that shares your media with a huge collection of friends and family, this is another reason to go for this. Because even if you weren't going to go for the bleeding edge media and you've just got general, very high standard media, this can micromanage a wide variety of connected users simultaneously. Not only within Plex Media Server, but of course, and here is me logging into a different NAS device here, you can utilize QTS and QUTS, which is a ZFS file system supported platform. That means greater inconsistency checks internally, as well as greater inline compression and greater inline compaction, meaning that when the data is on it, you can run a multitude of different ops within QUTS to save even more space as this larger multimedia arrives. And with an increased utilization of SSD and handling of SSDs, meaning block sizes can be adjusted accordingly to the I/O, that individual operations of multimedia, rather than standard OS level file sizes, data block sizes. This is a system that could be truly customized and optimized beautifully, and with a wide range of first party and AAA plus applications that really do rival that of Synology. AI powered recognition and surveillance, in photo recognition, virtual machine handling, container applications, office applications, backup tools, synchronization tools, all of which are first party, and all of those applications for your desktop, Mac, Windows, iOS, Android, even Linux devices. It is a powerhouse system to talk about there, and a real big ROI factor to put in there. It's just a solid system, and there's a reason that when we go to the results of that review, we gave it 9.0. It's one of the third highest scoring NAS devices we've ever looked at. There are question marks around QNAP and its handling of deadbolt and ransomware. We always have to mention that, and we will continue to mention that for at least 5 to 7 years after the fact. But still, nonetheless, if that doesn't concern you, or you've already got your firewall and your update and your security managed, that won't even appear on your radar, and ultimately making this the ultimate 8K Plex Media Server NAS. And there you go. Those were the best NAS I would recommend for Plex Media Server, based on price, based on ability, based on all-round support of multimedia, and the best return on investment you can get. Now, before you go, just a quick few things. There is a link in the description to the full guide breaking down how we chose these NASs, as well as other features and things you should factor in when looking at a NAS for Plex Media Server. But it doesn't stop there. And there's going to be those of you out there that have watched this video and gone, I could have built something better for that. That thing's really expensive. What an absolute pain. What an absolute swizz or a con. I can definitely build my own. Well, for those of you that are following the channel, I believe on Friday the 22nd it presumably goes live. This is my Johnsbow N3 build with the i9 599 board. That is an i9 12th gen board. We built a Johnsbow NAS from scratch, and we will be doing a Plex performance test on this system in the new year. Might even arrive just before New Year 2023, so do stay tuned for that. But if you want early access to all of these videos, I strongly recommend becoming either one of our YouTube members or heading over to NAScompares and joining our membership tier. It's £4 a month, £8 a month, or £18 a month, but they all have different benefits, ranging from expedited support all the way through to getting early access to the videos and our monthly Zoom, where we talk about everything happening in storage directly with you, and it's a private Zoom just for those members. But all of those tiers will give you access to these videos early as they become available there. So members of that tier have had this video accessible for days, and when you go to our R1 review, where we went through this new DIY potential NAS alongside the R7 NAS from Asustor, and another video on Plex performance and 8K performance testing on the new Thunderbolt version of the 874, they've had access to these videos for quite a while now. And if you want access to a lot of these videos early and more, look into those membership tiers. Apart from that, if you do need further support and you want free support, you can always take advantage of the free advice section over on NAScompares. It's on the right hand side of every single page at NAScompares. There's the NAS builder, the free advice section, and links to all of the individual tools that Ed has developed to help you choose the right drives for your NAS system at the best price and get the best price per terabyte for storage drives and other utilizations for your NAS. But again, if you don't want to use those services, we also have a Discord you can use. We've got our forum there, and we do recommend other platforms for support that vary in terms of official use and third-party community support, and I recommend you check them out. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've had a great 2023. I look forward to seeing you in 2024, and apart from that, I will see you next time.